Welcome to Hidden History, Stories from the Secret City. I'm Keith McDaniel, along with my co-host, Ray Smith. Good morning, Ray.
Hey, Keith, how are you today?
Well, other than the fact that I may sound a little stopped up because one of my students, I'm sure, gave me a cold or something like that. But other
Well,
than
that's going
that, I'm
around.
good. Other than
Yeah,
that, I'm good.
it is going around. A lot of people are sick.
That is true. That is true. All right. Well, let's get started. We've got a special guest from the other side of the world, don't we?
We do. I've got Harold Staun with us today. And Harold, like I said, I would really like for you to introduce yourself. You came to Oak Ridge back in October, and we had a good time together. But I only know you're writing an article about us. But tell us a little about you so we know what your role is.
Of course. Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Keith. Thanks for having me. I'm a journalist. I'm a staff writer for the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, which is a major newspaper in Germany. And I'm basically covering culture, media stuff, and occasionally I do some travel writing. So um, I had I was in the States, in Tennessee. Kentucky, that area last year to do a bit of both, to do some reporting on let's say the political mood in front of the election, and also a travel story about Tennessee, and or several stories. And this very special story of Oak Ridge caught my mind, and I thought I should pay it a visit. So that brought me to Oak
Yes.
Ridge.
And I'm glad you did. I remember well the time we spent together, and I was I was enthralled by your questions. Your questions were very insightful, and you obviously knew some things about Oak Ridge before arriving. But I hope you were able to learn some things that you did not know before getting there as well.
A lot of things, basically, yes. And I think I just scratched the surface of what there is to know and what there is to find out, which is maybe the case in on every area or city you just visit for 1 or 2 days, and try to find out the history. But in the case of Oak Ridge, it has a special. I think everybody is still digging about that history because it has been secret for such a long time, and that's really a special element of that story.
You're right. We're known as the secret city, and even though we try to get rid of that and let as much of it out as we can, there's still thoughts that we have more secrets than we are sharing with people, which is true. There are some things that we don't share, but by and large, the history of Oak Ridge goes well beyond the atomic bomb, and I think people are realizing that things like nuclear medicine, nuclear navy, nuclear energy, and in fact today. Uh, the governor, I guess yesterday or day before, just announced that he has increased the funding for the nuclear renaissance up to, I believe it's 95 million now that's being put in to encourage nuclear industries to locate in Oak Ridge. And since you were here, we've added a very large contract with Areno, a French company, to build a centrifuge plant, a multi-billion-dollar investment. And other things are happening as well. So while Oak Ridge has a huge history, we're creating history even today.
Yeah, I mean, what I found so interesting is, how should I say that, that special relation the people in Oak Ridge must have to its own past and to its own history, because uh, what I noticed is that you really take a lot of effort in telling what you could not tell for so long, and at the same time you have to demolish everything because for obvious environmental reasons, and for for security reasons, maybe, or because it's parts of that technology and all that construction has become obsolete. So you're kind of destroying your own past for good reasons on the one hand, and on the other hand, you are really taking much of an effort to preserve it and to tell it to the world, and that's a remarkable tension I found.
The Manhattan Project National Historical Park will be 10 years old in November of this year. It was established in November 2015. And in that time, we have grown in the ability to share our story. I mean, the fact that it's a national historical park obviously draws attention and brings people to Oak Ridge. Even things like the Oppenheimer movie. Have you seen that perchance?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I mean, it only mentions Oak Ridge twice and Tennessee once. And we doubled our tourism in Oak Ridge after that movie. I've done 28 bus tours since
Mm-hmm.
the Oppenheimer movie came out. So that's bringing significance to a population that might or might not know about Oak Ridge if it had not been for that movie. And
Mm.
again, the history over the years, you're right. We are tearing down buildings. We are doing demolition and cleanup, but we are selectively preserving things like the graphite reactor, building 9204-3 and 9731 at Y12. And of course, you included in your story what's happening at the K25 location. I hope we were able to provide you with permission to use that photograph. You had a really good one of the footprint of the
Yes.
K25 building.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, that's like brings together everything I just try to find words for that. If you, I mean that the do we have a problem with the connection now? I don't know.
No,
No,
everything's
okay.
fine on our
Look,
end.
look kind of frozen. So if you the viewpoint or the platform was not established yet. I don't know if it's now, but I could imagine standing there and looking at nothing at like this huge field, and I mean the footprint is really remarkable enough to let you grasp the dimensions this building had, but from a from a touristic viewpoint, it's really very special to be there. Finally, where the largest building in the world was, and then you stand there and see just the footprint, and yeah. But still,
Yeah,
I think it's a interesting way. But I don't know if maybe you can tell me what this area is kind of if there are any projects to develop it, and in what way is it going to stay like that empty footprint area, or are there some plans to develop it?
well, there's some plans, and part of it includes finishing that what's now being called an interpretive center, and it's scheduled construction to complete in March or April at the latest, and then exhibits are going in, and it'll take a few months to get all of it ready, but by the late summer, it should be open to the public. Now, in addition to that, there will be at least a dozen wayside markers and a roadway that goes around that footprint so that people can actually drive around it or walk around it. There'll be access to get close to it if you're interested in that. And when the footprint is completed, there are plans to put uh, poles at each of the corners, and then put some sort of a marker, a flag, or something up on them so you can see the size of the building more readily. Now, this is just Ray talking. Nobody else understands or agrees with this, so I don't know if it'll ever happen. But I'd like to see a laser show so that in the early evening, if you turned on the laser and there were mirrors up on top of those poles, you'd see an outline of the building. if you
Hmm.
put a little bit of mist up there, something that would show the laser beam. But I don't know if I can ever get that done. At any rate, the footprint itself will likely be planted with some different grass, maybe switchgrass or something. I don't know, but it will stand out by the poles on the corners and a different texture in the actual footprint. Now, some of the concrete is still there, but not very much. Most of it has been removed because of the contamination of the area, but it's all been cleaned up, and people will be able to walk out and have access to it by late summer, early fall.
Now, Harold, you were talking a little bit about, you know, telling the story of the past, and and embracing the future. One of the reasons I think there's been so much effort in being able to tell the story, or feeling an urgency in order to tell the story, is that many of the people that, to be honest, most of the people that were alive during the Manhattan Project are no longer with us.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the next generation and the next generation and the next generation that we feel compelled to be able to keep that history alive through being able to tell the story. I teach high school, and so I've made 6 documentary films about Oak Ridge. So I show kind of the main one to all of my high school classes, and I talk a little bit about the history. I teach video production, so I'm also I use it to talk about how I produced the film, and how I made it. But one thing is, I'm getting ready to take a field trip with a group of my advanced students and Ray, you're going to have to help me with the name of it, to the Enhanced Technology Center. I don't know if
Yeah.
it was here when you were here, it probably was, but it's a new, they use augmented reality, virtual reality, video production, and it's going to show my kids how they use what we are studying to be able to do the work that they're doing throughout the DOE system. So that's real important to us, is to be able to tell that next generation, those future generations, about the history as well. So
That's called the Oak Ridge Enhanced Technology and Training Center, and I have taken tours there. I would have loved to have taken you there as well, but I have to line it up well ahead of time to get in. But they do have an exceptionally good and state-of-the-art training program
mm-hmm.
using enhanced reality, and they do it so well.
Mm-hmm.
And I am really glad that you're taking your students there. I think that's a opportunity that we have in Oak Ridge that does not exist anywhere else in the world that I'm aware of.
And the beauty of it is, they're very the person that we're dealing with, he wants to show these kids that if they're interested in that as a career, it doesn't just have to be doing video production and working at a TV station. It could be in a specialty area such as the Department of Energy or NNSA or whatever, that utilizes that kind of advanced technology in video and creative production. So that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is so advanced, and I've been there and had people to go through it, and they will actually let you do and you can look, and you're in a room, you can see the room, but you can also see equipment that you need to operate and deal with, and you can move something from one place to the other. And Keith, I don't know exactly how they do it, but they know exactly where your fingers are.
Yeah,
And
sure.
they can tell, it's a video, and
Yeah.
the video camera is pointing on your fingers, and you've got little dots on them, but they can actually see each finger as it moves.
Yeah, sure.
And one of the exercises is to pick up a small cube of material and place it in a container. So I went down to it and I picked it up with one hand. and started moving it, and it fell out of my hand because you see, I'm supposed to use two hands to move it, so it wouldn't let me get by with just using one. It's amazing how, and it will train you very quickly how you're supposed to do whatever it is you're doing because
Yeah.
you're visually there.
Harold, what was, when you visited Oak Ridge, what was the thing that surprised you most?
Um, Good question. I think I really was surprised that um, that considering the vast dimensions of these buildings, that I that I could see so little of it, that it really was torn down completely. K25 and Y12 I couldn't go, but I think they are also proceeding in demolishing that part of the
Yeah.
constructions. Um, but um, I was glad that there were still some of the semester buildings left, and that the town square could this could like work a bit like a time machine, because it's really like an old town 50s town square with that wonderful restaurant, and so that gave me some kind of idea how the how it was. And I mean, for me it's special anyway, because I think that um uh and we talked about it on the tour, right? I think the that kind of that structure of American cities or small towns is quite unusual for me, coming from a European background, that there is no real center, and it's all sprawl, and you don't really know where the city starts and where it ends, and everything is car based,
Yeah.
which and the interesting thing I noticed was that was some kind of research I did when I came back, reading about the history of that Semesters building, that it was one of the first um, projects who kind of constructed that in that way. I mean, in a way which has become typical for American cities after the war, very much based on the idea of a car not having one center, having small urban areas where you could get your groceries and everything. And so the it was, and with these houses that had to be built quite fast and efficiently, and still having a certain modern standard, because you wanted to attract a certain kind of people who had who expected a certain living standard,
Yeah.
renowned scientists and things like that, people like that. So that that was very interesting to learn how like the history of like even like maybe like a secret history within the secret history in a way. Uh, so, and I'm glad that we could see some of those houses passing by.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. When they built, and Ray can correct me, I may be wrong, but
No.
when they built when they built Oak Ridge, when they created Oak Ridge, it was not like a typical Southern town. I mean, it was just created with, like you said, the neighborhoods. You know, you had groups of neighborhoods
Yeah,
throughout the reservation, and I think a part of that was because it was not built by Southerners. You know, it was not your typical Southern town. The first house that my wife and I bought was a Semesto. It was a D house, and you know those houses, they were built to last 7, 8 years. And I think when we bought ours, it was 50 years old, you know, at the time, and it's still standing, you know. So, yeah, you're right when you said it was a kind of a new technology that they used, and it also had to be a technology that they could uh, build a lot of them very quickly, you know. There's a great photograph. All of the houses had fireplaces. And there's a great photograph that Ed Westcott took of a neighborhood that it looked like a forest because all that was standing in this neighborhood were the fireplaces because they built the fireplaces first. Okay, and then they came in and built the house around it. So it's pretty amazing.
You know
And
that. Go ahead, Harold.
no, but one funny thing. Well, I think there are big differences, but that I had uh, in a way it reminded me of the way that those model towns were built in socialism. So at the time you fought the communists, you had the central planning committees who constructed the government, who constructed a whole city, and that was an interesting thing, I think.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened here. The Army Corps of Engineers, they at first General Groves wanted Stone and Webster. Now Stone and Webster was building Y-12, and he asked them to design a town. And the person working to design the town just drew some squares and some blocks and said, here's what the town will look like. Well, Groves said, you've obviously not been there to see this thing. It's rolling hills and ridges. That won't work. So he went and hired Skidmore, Owens, and Merrill to do the design, and they incorporated the lay of the land. If you'll remember when we were driving around on the East Village area there around Jackson Square, 90% of those homes are are still the original Manhattan Project era houses. They've just had aluminum siding, vinyl siding, brick siding. You know, they've been maintained over the years and altered, had rooms added on, what have you. But you can still see the A, B, and C, the alphabet houses. You can see a 3-bedroom. You can see the D, like Keith is talking about. The D, by the way, has a split roof. In other words, 2 levels of a roof, and you can recognize that right quick. But the key is when he had Skidmore, Owens, and Merrill to design the layout, they used the lay of the land, but they also intentionally created communities. There were about 7 of them. Jackson Square was one, Jefferson Center was one, Grove Center, Grove just named for a grove of trees, not General Grove.
Right.
But at any rate, they created these communities, and they created them with the thought of people living there can walk to where they need to be. I mean, that's a concept that's now being utilized in big cities, creating inner city kind of activities where people can have walking access. But it was there, what, 80 years ago, they were understanding that. And then the next thing that happened, you mentioned about the need to have a place, even though it was here in the middle of Appalachia, have a place that would be attractive to these scientists and engineers where they had expectations for raising a family, had to be duplicated here. So Groves hired Alden Blankenship and gave him a free rein. He said, build the best school system in the nation. Pay the teachers the same salary they would get if they were working in New York City. And they did. They built 10 schools in a matter of months. And they had, 75,000 people living here by the August of 45. And those schools were already recognized as one of the best in the nation. And still today, Oak Ridge schools are highly recognized as being very good schools. Not to take away from what Keith's doing in Roane County. This
No.
whole area is very well uh, developed in the way of school systems.
Yeah,
And
so talking about schools, there was this other story which I found very interesting because it was also kind of a secret in the secret history, the story of the Scarborough 85. And you told me a little bit about it when we passed by that area where also there's nothing left to see, but I think it's
Yeah.
and I read about the attempts to build a memorial site for that part of the history. I hope
Yeah.
it's gonna happen because uh, yeah, it's really I don't know if it's it's hard to say. I think if the fact that nobody knows about them, also they have, despite they have been before the famous Clinton, what was it,
Clinton
Clinton
12.
5 and Little Rock 9.
Yeah.
Um, Nobody heard about this story. I don't know if that has to do with the special secrecy of Oak Ridge, or rather with the kind of with the fact that or this part of history still has to be rediscovered everywhere in the States. But it's really interesting to and the yeah how that part of history also happened there and is to be discovered.
I'm delighted in listening to your perspective on that. I mean, I'm seeing it from the inside. I know what has happened. I know the fact that the desegregation of those two schools took place in 1955. It took place in a fairly quiet kind of way. There was not any outside agitation. It did get national recognition at the time, but then the Little Rock situation, the Clinton situation, those were so tumultuous and so different that they took the centerpiece, and then
Mm,
other civil rights activities started happening. But if you actually and we didn't for 65 years, we did not note the significance of that Scarborough 85. But when you start looking at it, it was on the very forefront of
mm,
all of the civil rights activities that continued to happen over the ensuing years. Now, we just lost another one of them this earlier this week. They're in their 80s, and they're not going to be with us much longer. So we really are hoping to get that monument in place. We're making good progress on it. We had a concert here earlier, well, last week we had a concert, and the lady doing the concert helped us to raise, and I think we raised $5,000 as a result of people just making donations. But that's the kind of initiative that I'm proud of, that we're now recognizing those Scarborough 85. Why we didn't do it for 65 years?
Well,
That's another story.
yeah, and here's the thing about, you know, I have a different perspective on it as well because I made the Clinton 12 documentary film. Uh, that's one of the films that I made, and I was hired to do that almost 20 years ago now. I think 18 years ago. They were celebrating their 50th anniversary of the integration. And the Clinton 12 story is, like Ray said, it was a very tumultuous story. And they never claimed, and when we never claimed in the film that they were the first school in the South to be segregated, I mean, to be integrated. It was very specific because they knew about what had happened in Oak Ridge a year earlier, but they were the very first school to be integrated as a result of Brown versus the Board of Education.
mm.
That was forced by the Supreme Court decision. They were the first school in the South to do that. And like Ray said, the folks in Clinton, they were coming up on their 50th anniversary, and they embraced that history and decided to celebrate that history by doing the museum, by doing the documentary, by doing the statues outside, the bronze statues. And it kind of took off. That story kind of took off because it never really been told very well before. So it doesn't take anything away from the accomplishments in Oak Ridge for the Scarborough 85 to celebrate what happened in Clinton, because it was a completely different set of circumstances that caused that to happen. So anyway,
Yeah, no, you're right. I think you shouldn't have a competition.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
it's not.
Uh,
Not a competition. It's just and you mentioned the fact that there's more attention being paid to those kind of issues now in recent years, and I believe that also has brought the Scarborough 85 to the forefront because of the national attention that's being paid to that period in our history. But
Mm.
Oak Ridge has many aspects to its history, and I think you will recognize that. And I'm looking forward to the article that you've written about us. You're telling me that it's likely to be out next week. So by the time Keith gets this posted on YouTube, we'll be able to share that link with
Yeah,
folks. Hope they'll
we'll put a link on in the
enjoy it.
comments when we post this for sure. So
Mhm. Anything else you'd like to tell us about your trip to Oak Ridge, or any other things that you're working on that you'd like people to know about?
Um, no, I think there's too much and too little to say. It's a bit, but I'm definitely hoping to come back because I've just been there for the better part of a day, and there's so much to see. And in one of your recent videos, I heard you talking about the Oak Ridge City History Museum, and we passed so many things that we didn't have time to go in there, but that sounded really interesting as well. And in the meantime, I'm keeping myself busy. But I discovered that on the K25 museum site, you have all these interviews, these oral history interviews with people who worked at the facilities, and that has been so fascinating just to get a glimpse of how of the daily life and how these people saw. I think they've recorded not at that time, but as when they people remembered what they their time there. But it's really interesting.
I'll send you a link to some more. Keith has interviewed hundreds of people as for the oral histories, and I'm not sure what link you're using. We have 800 of them that are in the public library, and
I saw that there were a lot, but
yeah,
I'll
I,
send you that link just to be sure you're getting the best access.
yeah, absolutely.
By the
All
way,
right.
Keith and I are recognizing the need to restart that initiative of capturing oral histories. We have let it lapse in Oak Ridge. We did a good job for the Manhattan Project, but we're not doing as well for the Cold War era and for the nuclear renaissance that's coming up now. And we're trying to get people to understand it's important. Just like you just said, there's no substitute for talking to the real people who are doing the real work, who are having the real experiences, and listening to what they feel and say and have experienced. So oral histories are a very important element, and
Exactly.
we let that slip. So we're trying to get that started again.
Yeah, and I used an analogy the other day. I was trying to explain something to my kids, and I said, and this kind of relates to why it's important to do oral histories. Imagine trying to describe the color red, okay, when you could just show the color red.
Yes.
Okay, that's why it's important to hear from the people who actually made the history and lived the history. So,
mm,
so hopefully we can get that going.
Yeah.
So,
mm. I
all
mean,
right, Ray,
let's
thank you
just
very much, Harold. Thank you so
It's
much for
that
being with us.
simple.
We appreciate it.
thanks for having me. Yeah, thank you.
All right. And Ray, who do we
So,
have coming up next? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah, I knew you were going to ask me that, and I didn't check it. Wait just a minute. Historian, history, guest master.
Is it
I got it. It's going to be Bill Hardwick.
yes?
Remember Bill?
Mm-hmm.
He's going to talk to us about Cormac McCarthy, and
Okay.
a book that he's writing, and he teaches literature at the University of
Right.
Tennessee,
Yeah.
and he will give us some insights into Cormac McCarthy.
All right. Very
that's
good.
interesting. Does Cormac McCarthy have a connection to Oak Ridge? I know that he was living in Knoxville, but
Yeah, he now. And thank you for asking. He
Yeah.
lived in Knoxville and wrote some books about the Knoxville area. But his latest publication, The Passenger, and Clara Marthis, that are a two-book combination that came out right before he passed away. And his brother visited Oak Ridge a number of years ago, and I gave him a tour and actually got him inside Y12 to the Calutrons. And what he was doing is he was doing research for Carmack because a character in the stories that he wrote was one that worked in Oak Ridge during the Manhattan Project. And he wanted to know what she would have experienced going into the plant, what she would have seen, and how that would have been. Now, and he wrote that up in those two books. And I'm delighted that he was able to do that. I'll tell you one more thing about it. He and his brother Dennis and I are good friends now. I've been out to had meals with him out in Santa Fe. But I told him after I had taken him into Y12, and I said, "Now, Dennis, you owe me for getting this information for Carmack." He said, "Yeah, I do." I said, "I want two things from you." He said, "What's that?" I said, "I want Carmack to autograph two books for me to give one to each of my sons." Now, Cormac McCarthy never autographs books. He just didn't do that. But Dennis got me to. I hope it's ones that Carmack signed and not Dennis.
Yeah,
But my
that's
sons
great.
are real proud of it. They love Cormac McCarthy books, so I was proud to do that.
All
But
right.
thanks for asking, letting me tell that story.
All right, folks.
Great.
Thanks for watching, and we'll be back in
Thank
a
you.
couple of weeks with another hidden history.